I'm a gardener, and I believe in the adage, the time to pick a weed is when you can do it with 2 fingers. I believe it. I just don't always do it. Over the winter, I let the weeds in our yard get out of hand, and trying to get rid of them now when they're big is a terrible chore. I stick with it maybe, 30 minutes or an hour at a time, but I found that, in fact, I do disrupt and even accidentally pull the plants I want to keep. When I weed vigorously, and the weeds are growing very close to or even in my plants, and they're big weeds. It's that Johnson grass stuff. It's awful. It would be better for me to weed slowly and carefully, of course, but that would take me forever, and I don't have forever. I just need to get those weeds out of my front yard. Lord, give me patience and give it to me right now. I've found that some of the weeds have gotten so big that I don't have the strength to get them out now that the ground is dry. That's the way I do things. But Jesus says no. Let them all grow up together. Jesus obviously was not growing flowers in his front yard. So why? Why let them grow up together? Because I don't have the time, wisdom, strength, or discernment to only root out the evil seeds, the weeds. Only God has that kind of time, wisdom, patience, and strength. And God is not willing to lose even one stem of the good wheat. In our gospel story this morning, the householder's slaves are just itching to get into that field and root out those weeds. And I know how they feel. But in fact, they even question the good man as to whether or not he planted actually good seed or maybe weed seeds. Maybe Jesus, the good householder, planted the weeds by mistake. It's interesting that we are so eager to look beyond how we might be involved that we want to blame God for the evil that we see. We say, if you're all powerful and all knowing, why didn't you stop the enemy from planting the weeds in the first place? Evil is real. It exists. Evil is what has broken God's good creation. All we have to do is look around us. Polluting God's earth, rivers, and oceans is evil. The warming of our world and waters and its terrible consequences is evil. Systemic racism is evil. Violence on and exclusion of members of the LGBTQ+ community is evil. Hatred of our brothers and sisters who are different from us is evil. Anything that crushes the hopes and opportunities of any of God's children is evil. Evil needs to be rooted out. But Jesus says, wait, you don't have the wisdom and time and discernment to root out evil. Only God does. So what does this caution from Jesus to wait mean? Are we to hold back from working toward justice? That's not how Jesus lived his life on earth. Perhaps this is a cautionary tale for those of us who think we're on the right side. Maybe Jesus is saying, in your lofty eagerness to root out other people's injustice, hastiness can do more harm than good. Perhaps Jesus is asking us to look first at our own selves and what good or harm our own actions cause. People speak of cultural humility, which is turning away from thinking that our way of doing things is always the best. Our society is extremely divided right now, and there is very little affinity group humility in our country. And I don't just mean politics. Just as the slaves thought they knew exactly the difference between the wheat and the weeds, and Jesus said to them, "Not so fast. You may be sure, but you're not necessarily always right." Just so, many of us are very sure what's right and wrong about everything, but we don't always pluck the weed instead of the wheat. So what is Jesus waiting for? Maybe he's asking us to spend time educating ourselves and discerning right action. Could he be asking us to slow down, be more humble, and open to others? Are we really called to win the argument when it comes to seeing what's right and wrong in the world around us? We have only to conjure up one of the many photos in the news of people bitterly opposed to one another's positions, up close and personal with one another, faces contorted in rage, fists raised, and often violence ensues. Surely this is not the way of Jesus. But neither is ignoring evil and injustice the way of Jesus. He spoke truth to power. He called out hypocrites. He even cleared the temple courts of those who cheated the poor, cloaking their dishonesty in religion. That made him angry, filled with zeal for the house of God, the scriptures say. But he didn't hate and belittle the powerful who abused God's poor. He brought their evil actions out into the light in which evil cannot flourish. He told the truth in love, which alone can expose lies. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. Hate multiplies hate. Violence multiplies violence, and toughness multiplies toughness in a descending spiral of destruction." His words reflect the way of Jesus. I've been speaking of both corporate evil, the harm we do in our society as a group, either explicitly or implicitly, as our confession says, the evil done on our behalf, the harm which we silently, often ignorantly, allow. But I've been speaking also of individual sin, the harm we personally inflict. In our gospel today, the good householder says that the weeds and the wheat should grow together and be separated at harvest, with the wheat put into the barn and the weeds burned. Some people read this scripture thinking that the wheat represents good people and the weeds represent bad people, and that at the end of the world, the bad people will burn. One of the problems that I find with this interpretation is that Jesus knew, as even I know, that no one is either all good or all bad. All of us are saints and sinners. We all contain weeds as well as wheat. I would like to offer a reading of this story as seeing that besides the triumph of justice, God will also separate the evil out of each of us individually. I believe this happens as we grow spiritually during our lives here on earth, and not just at an apocalyptic end of time. And sometimes confronted with our sin, with the consequences of our self-centeredness, it feels like fire. But it's the refiner's fire that purifies the gold. God is patient and allows the weeds to grow with the wheat. But the building of God's kingdom here requires that the evil be rooted out, that justice be done, that the poor, oppressed, and marginalized be raised up, that all be treated equally and have equal access to the good our society offers. That means the attitudes, actions, and institutions that hold them down must be rooted out and replaced. This requires our assent and our active cooperation with God working toward justice. This is what God, the good householder, is willing to do for and with us, drawing the whole world closer and closer to God's perfect and pure heart of love.